Hi everyone, we're talking about improving student nutrition today. This is chapter 10 in your textbook. And when we think about this just at surface level, I think it's easy for us to mostly recall individual interactions and how we can help students at the most basic level and one-on-one forms of interaction. But this lecture, you'll see that it's a more global sense of how we mean improving student nutrition, and there's a wider approach that you can take. So that's really how we're going to address today. So a quick overview, we're going to cover some strategies for improving student nutrition, and what I mean by that is, like I just referenced before, so developing appropriate relationships and getting involved in the appropriate types of opportunities around campus and in your community. And then we're going to talk about helpful hints and strategies for the classroom. So these are kind of integrated within, so you'll see that there's a lot of overlap, but we'll get through them as quickly as possible. And in order to check to see if y'all are actually listening to my wonderful voice, I'm going to trickle some Thanksgiving jokes throughout the lecture, and then I'm going to ask you if you actually recall the answer so we can have a good laugh on the Tuesday we get back. So here's your first one. It's my worst joke, but it's the first one. What kind of key do you use on Thanksgiving? A turkey. You're welcome. All right, strategies for improving student nutrition. This is, again, getting back at what I mentioned before. It's a district-wide effort. So you are not the only player involved. There's a lot of people involved and different programs involved. And among those are administration, different cafeteria personnel, teachers, and probably one of the bigger driving forces are parents. And they aim to implement certain cafeteria programs, different community-based nutrition programs, etc. One of the most important things and probably the biggest challenges in improving student health or student nutrition is that your students actually have to buy into it, and they have to see the actual importance of nutrition. They have to understand that it's important for their health and that they should care about it. And one of the main ways to get your students to actually believe in nutrition is to believe in it yourself. So make sure that whatever programs you're backing or trying to implement, that it's backed by good science and that you are actually someone who trusts it and believes in it as well. So a quick overview, these bullet points below are what we're going to be covering in class in this lecture today. So we'll quickly move on to the form of a school health committee. So this is a group of people that you pull together to oversee nutritional health and physical activity opportunities for the district. So generally this is district-wide. And maybe some of y'all have been on a committee, maybe not necessarily a health committee, but maybe you've been on a committee before, so it would be a similar structure. So when you form this committee, there's a few things you do want to consider. You want to talk to administration. You want to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong by forming this committee. You want to find the people who are going to be your biggest advocates, so sympathetic to your cause. That's what we mean. Like, they see nutrition or improving student nutrition as really important, so they're going to put some effort in to help you out. Joining PTA meetings and get involved with school-wide projects. Again, this is where you can start to get parents involved if they're not already part of your committee. And then using marketing strategies like newspapers and online sources if your school allows that to help get your word out. And then if you're really aiming to make this a comprehensive committee, you're going to want to invite various personnel to be on the committee. And those are similar people to who I mentioned previously, but teachers, staff, administrators, PE faculty, because generally they're going to talk about physical activity and nutrition in their classes anyway, or at least they should. So you can include people like that from universities, or make sure you can have some PE teachers from your actual school. So when we talk about conducting initial research, this is not an extensive kind of research that's being conducted. It's just really to better understand what's going on in the areas around you and the schools around you. And one of the things to keep in mind or bear in mind when you're evaluating existing programs within your district or in other areas of the United States is that not all nutrition programs are going to work for all school districts. So know your school district well, know the needs of your students, and know what is accessible within your district to the average student. and even those that fall below average. So quickly, I want to reference, or at least bring your attention to this link right here, and this is a good good resource for you all. Let me see if I can pull it up here. We're getting there. So the screen's a little bit small, but I did want to direct you to this, so please visit this site. Your electronic resource asks you to identify various resources that you can share with teachers and parents and students. And a lot of the things I'm showing you today concerning nutrition are exactly what I'm looking for. So different resources online that you can utilize, and this is just one example. Other examples include things like using the USDA website. There's so much information on there that could be valuable to you as a teacher. So go ahead and visit that as well, and become familiar with that website so you can quickly draw appropriate materials from there. And then we've talked about research articles and the importance of empirical research to better understand what science can be trusted. So another point that we will address today is really developing an action plan. So you have your committee, you've done your research, and so you have to set some goals. You have to set short-term and long-term goals for your school district. One of the things that we will need when setting these goals is to make sure, among other things, but one of the most important things is to make sure that these goals are measurable. So the reason for this is because when you want to promote your program and you want to seek out support for your program, people are going to want to see that it's effective. So if you are setting goals that cannot be measured, then it's really difficult to demonstrate effectiveness of a program. So among other things, we do want our goals to be objective and measurable. Another thing with your action plan that could be incorporated is brainstorming ideas for policy change. This can be a vast brainstorming session, and it could span a whole academic year. Coming up with an action plan does not happen overnight. But a few ideas in terms of how policy change can be implemented. It can be promotional, and it can be community presentations. So you could have the idea to change lunch menus, which I think we've probably seen most often. And then another thing, I don't know if as a class we're very familiar with this, but this idea of applying for grants for nutritional programs. So applying for a grant basically means that it's governmentally funded or privately funded. It's money that you basically apply for to support your needs. So you generate this proposal for a nutrition program, and you don't have the money to implement it. So you need money. So you apply for a grant, and maybe you apply for a grant with the USDA, and they give you $150,000, and that will help implement your nutritional program for the first year. So it can vary. That's just one example, but it's an interesting and challenging thing to do, but pays off because it's free money. So look into that, and maybe if you can have the opportunity to get on a grant every now and then, it's a really good experience. So a little quick example of talking about nutrition in a class, you can use riddles, and an example of that would be this wonderful banana riddle. I'm yellow, I'm sweet, I'm what monkeys like to eat, I grow in trees, serve me with peanut butter, please. What am I? Banana, duh. All right, there's a whole bunch of programs, a whole bunch of little activities and riddles and games and stuff that you can find online. And again, this is something nice to keep in your back pocket for when you're going to be a teacher later, whether or not you're a health and PE teacher or not. Having these available at hand is really, really effective. So go ahead and snag these links, put them in your resources for later, and let me know how they go. So establishing policies that promote healthful nutrition. One of the challenging things with policy change is that you need to get approval from so many people. And one of the most important is the school board. So your school board needs to approve whatever policy change you're trying to implement, and that can be a slew of things. But you can't really just go about changing things without appropriate approval. That's the key thing here. So some guidelines when you're trying to implement new policies for healthful nutrition is that all students need to be able to access nutritious food, and this is not always the easiest. But if it's going to be implemented in your academic setting, then all students should have access. No one should be neglected. But outside of the academic or school setting, that may not be the case. And then this is one that I think we can all definitely get behind. Your eating environment just needs to be clean, safe, and attractive. You're not going to want to eat in a space that's dirty, crowded, and just unkempt. You don't want that space. You want it to be clean, safe, attractive space where you want to eat. One of the other rules is lunch is at noon. You need to serve lunch around lunchtime. Can't wait until 3 or 4 o'clock. Pretty straightforward. I think we've seen this quite a bit, though it may not be true for IM Circle, but vending machines should serve nutritious food. So if at all possible and as best as we can, we want our vending machines to serve nutritious food. And then this idea of nutrition education needs to take place. So we've seen a little bit of this and I know some of you have written about this in your newsletter briefs, and I know that some of you have done this in your lesson plan. So that's what we mean by that, is that nutrition education needs to take place in a number of forms. So the two that I just referenced are just 2 examples. It can be a lot more structured than that as well. And these are just some tips for promoting nutrition. But before I get to that, I want to give you my second joke. Ready? It's quite the wind-up I'm giving you. Okay. What smells the best at Thanksgiving? Your nose. Okay, now back on track. Other tips for promoting nutrition. So some schools, this isn't the case with my school, or at least I wasn't aware of it, having healthy school breakfast and lunch menus. So we didn't have breakfast at my school, but I will be the first to admit that I was in a pretty affluent area. So most of my peers in elementary school had access to lunch, at least to my understanding. But now apparently public schools are required to serve low-cost breakfast and lunch to students. So basically your students have to have access to meals at a very low cost, and that's a requirement. And it's really challenging to come up with the types of foods that you're going to serve, because you want them to have as many nutrients as possible, but the lowest number of calories, because we know with higher calorie count, over time that contributes to, or it can contribute to negative health consequences. So this idea of calories that are empty, that means they don't really lack substance, or they don't have the nutrients that we're looking for. So things like fiber, minerals, and vitamins. I think that there's some of you who've done your newsletter briefs who could probably elaborate on this to a greater degree. And so when we present, I'll ask you to do that, because we have talked about this. And so this concept of point of decision posters, I want you to think back to when you were an elementary school kid and you were in line for lunch, and what that experience was like. And recall if there were any posters up there promoting what you should eat. I remember clear as day there was a poster, a Got Milk poster, right next to my lunch line. I saw it every day as I was waiting there to pay for lunch. So we got lunch with every meal. We got milk with every meal, and so I drank my milk. Who knows if that was the reason, or if because my parents made me drink milk every night. But either way, that's the point of these decision posters. They really promote what you should be eating and drinking. One of the things that can be dangerous is food as a reward. It can be great, but it can be dangerous. So it can be a problem when we attach food consumption and food choice to self-esteem. I think we've seen that frequently it's made it humorous, but it can be really dangerous, and so it's something we want to avoid at the younger ages. And we've all had parties in class, I'm sure, and one of the things that can be done is to implement a healthy celebration policy. I know that this doesn't sound like the most fun, but you can. So the policy can regulate what kind of foods and drinks you allow on campus and in the classroom, etc. So those bright green cupcakes I brought for my birthday in preschool probably wouldn't have been okay. You can also use healthy food fundraisers. As for the classroom strategies to improve student nutrition, again, this goes back to this idea of doing your initial research, and that involves gathering data about your students' eating behaviors. And you would be shocked to know how little they know about what they're actually eating. So you can just use observational method, or you can use self-report survey to get information from your students. And what I mean by self-report survey is that you ask your students questions about their eating behaviors, and then they are the ones that are reporting on what they actually eat. Then just an example of a classroom project, you can have your students create a shopping list, and then have them go to the grocery store with their parents and have them experience the concept of healthy shopping with a family member so that it's reinforced twofold. Okay, so teaching the basics about good nutrition using MyPlate. I know that this is something that a lot of you have touched on, and I will direct you to that website quickly or shortly after this. But you can also use this idea of healthy eating timeline. So when you're teaching the basics about good nutrition, you can encourage this idea of eating smaller meals over the course of a day rather than just a few really large meals. So I think we've all heard that. Getting that to be actually implemented in a child's daily routine is challenging because a lot of the things in a child's life are not controlled by them. So this would be something good if you're going to teach this, to encourage them to take this back to their parents to see how they can possibly implement this into their diet. But it's a way for you to educate them on something that they can also bring back home and see change. So I do want to take you to this MyPlate page really quickly. It's just a quick, it's a series of games you can see. Let's see right here. So there's a bunch of games here, so you can have your students test their knowledge on milk consumption and dairy products and calcium, and then you can also do physical activity stuff. And there's a lot of resources on here. So do pull this as well and put it in your back pocket for a resource to use later on. So continuing on with those classroom tips, this next point is kind of tricky and it's a really sensitive point. So I do want to state that before we get into that topic, but teaching age-appropriate weight management. So I say it's kind of tricky because teaching weight management is a sensitive thing regardless of age, body type, sex, anything like that. So you have to be highly sensitive when discussing this, and so teaching things that are age appropriate is really, really important. So discussing things that are simple math, like caloric intake and output. Showing students what the purpose is of those two things, why we need to take in calories, what does output look like. And then we've talked about this before in class, but knowing that relationship between weight and body composition. We've also talked about growth patterns for young children and that their weight is going to go up anyway because they're just growing. And so if a child is highly aware of their weight gain, but they're not fully developed and fully grown, then they have some mixed signals going on, and we need to clarify that. So one of the more important things you can do is reinforce making healthful choices, just in general. So if you nix the weight management thing, you can just encourage these healthful choices and hope that the weight management is a byproduct, but it is important to at least address. So another resource or game that I'm going to show you is having your students create their own pizza. This one's kind of cool. So your students can go to, it's the same website, it's just another game. So they can create their own pizza, they write their name, their grade level, and they go through and they put a whole bunch of toppings on there, and it's kind of a fun one. So then the last slide before I get to my best joke yet, just kidding. This is probably the most important point, and it goes back to what I started with, in that you should involve as many players as you can, but with strategy. So involve parents, get them involved to help promote ideas, Help them understand the science behind what they're doing and make sure that they're really well informed. So help them understand what BMI means. Help them understand the cognitive effects of physical activity and healthy eating. So for the good diet and proper physical activity, what cognitive benefits do we see? And also, what consequences do we see? So keep them involved and keep them informed by using newsletters and emails. So that's one thing that you all have already started. You've already developed some templates for newsletters. One thing about that is that when you're working with parents and you're talking with parents, you don't need to be as concerned with making sure the formatting is fun and young. You can include a lot more information, but still make it easy to read, succinct, to the point, and organized. And then send home a list of resources for healthy habits at home. This is again kind of an example of what I'm talking about in your electronic resource notebook. So you're going to identify a list of resources and put it in there for parents and children. So this again is just harping on that idea. And then this last point, if you have a wellness committee, invite parents to join. Get them involved in all possible avenues, because that way your message carries into the home. All right, so that's it. That's all we have for lecture today. But I do want to leave you with one last joke. Here it is. What side of the turkey has the most feathers? The outside. Oh, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all really enjoy time with your families and significant others, and take a little bit of a break from school for a couple days. So I'll see you all on Tuesday. Happy Thanksgiving.